Hey, I'm Spencer Lookabaugh, and I'm a photographer and filmmaker in Columbus, Ohio, and this is my review of the Fuji GFX 50R. Now, this camera is on a lot of people's minds. It just was announced earlier this year and has made a lot of waves, like its not predecessor, but it's sibling, the GFX 50S, for being a very affordable medium format digital camera. Now, I'll get into the price a little bit later, and affordable is somewhat relative, but the GFX 50S and the GFX 50R, have been able to get people into a medium format camera, which has a lot of distinct characteristics for a lot less than was previously possible. You can get either of those cameras with the 63mm, the standard lens, for well under $10,000, and there are certain benefits to it, and at the same time there are some drawbacks that I'll get into. But basically, this camera is allowing people to get a level of quality that just wasn't really previously attainable, and I think it's definitely there, and you'll see in some of the images, and I'll talk about kind of how different it really is and what those differences are, and why someone would maybe go with this camera over something like the D850 or the A7R III or 5D Mark IV and the other sort of flagship cameras that are out right now, because there are a lot of really good options on the market. So let's get into it. Now, of course, everyone's major complaint with this camera so far has been the ergonomics. And when I first saw the camera, I was a little worried too, but as I started to use the thing, I found that it really is just fine. I think the big issue that everyone has is the fact that there is no directional pad on the back of the camera like there are on every other Fuji camera and on most Nikons, and to some extent really almost every other camera out there. They did fortunately include the little joystick on the back that came with the X-T2 and X Pro 2 that Fuji has since made good use of. And that really does help the camera a lot. That makes the thing very easy to use. And even though they did take those 4 directional pad buttons off that could be custom programmed, you do have 4 total custom programmed buttons on the camera, 1 on the top and 3 on the back. So if you have functions that you use pretty often that aren't directly in the quick menu, or just want really easy access to, you can program to those. And really, after I kind of got used to where those were laid out, I found that not having that directional pad was really not that big of a deal. At first it took a little getting used to, because I have been a Fuji shooter for a while as well. I have an X-T2 and had an X Pro 2 at one point, both of which are very similarly laid out. So jumping over to this felt a little alien at first, but really after using it for 30 minutes or so, I started to feel really comfortable with it. And I'm just kind of really happy with the camera is overall. My only actual gripe about it is this grip. The camera is pretty thin, and this grip does protrude a little bit, but it doesn't really offer a lot of finger support, so you have to really have a pretty firm grip on the thing, or if you have a lens on it, just hold it from underneath. Makes it a little bit more comfortable. But the GFX 50S and even my X-T2 and the X Pro 2 seem to have a deeper grip than this, so it's not super comfortable. I usually end up holding most of the weight with my left hand under the camera while I have a hold on the lens. Because of that, and I don't know if there will ever be like an external grip or anything to add to this that could maybe change that, but I did find that to be kind of annoying after holding it for a while. It does sort of cramp your hand up, since there's not, so you can't grab it, you're kind of just grasping at it a little bit. But other than that, the camera's awesome, very well laid out, and it was definitely a pleasure to shoot with. While the GFX 50R is a pretty beefy camera to accommodate that larger sensor, and it is fairly heavy, it's not really that drastic compared to other full-frame DSLRs or the GFX 50S. The GFX 50S does feel a little bit bigger and a little heavier than this, and the GFX 50R comes in at about 1.7 pounds and the X-T2, as an example, comes in at about 1.1 pounds. So, you know, really not all that heavy, and as far as size goes, it is going to take up a little more space than your traditional DSLR because it is a little bit wider, so it might not fit into all the same pockets quite as well. You might need to adjust your bag if you're used to something like that. It's not going to add all that much weight, and I think if you were going to carry it around all day, use it as a secondary camera during a wedding or hike with it or anything like that, it's going to be really comfortable and isn't going to break your back like some other medium format setups might, especially in the film world, or if you're talking about older medium format setups that use a much beefier body. So all around, I think totally manageable, especially for those that are still shooting on DSLRs. If you are kind of a mirrorless person, this does feel, like I said in the last bit, kind of like a jumbo Fuji camera in a lot of respects. I mean, everything is very similar to the XE3 and X Pro 2, just kind of upsized. So I would definitely recommend getting your hands on it, but all in all, totally usable. Just might take a little bit of getting used to for people that haven't used something quite this size before, because it is a little bit outside the norm. The one thing that a lot of people started to get really excited about when the GFX 50S came out and carried over with the 50R, because it is the same sensor, is the resolution. And it has 50 megapixels, which is currently more than any full-frame DSLR or mirrorless camera. And the only other cameras that can match that are other medium format cameras like the Hasselblad X1D or any of the Phase 1 cameras. And 50 megapixels is a lot. I personally have made prints out of the GFX 50S, which again has the same sensor and lens system as this, up to about 44 inches by 64 inches. So almost as tall as I am. It's a huge print size. And I mean, really nothing can quite come close to this. I mean, the thing is so sharp. I have a couple images here that I'm just sharing that I shot with it, and they're kind of followed up by tight crops of them, so you can see the serious detail these capture. These were taken either with the 63mm 2.8 or the 120mm f4 macro, and the 63mm is kind of the standard lens for this system, and it is just super sharp. The 120 macro, of course, is just razor sharp as well and resolves quite a bit of detail. It's just a really impressive system, and if printing large is your thing, or something you're going to need to do, or if you need to crop a lot or do a lot of retouching, having that extra resolution can be really handy, and really there isn't anything better than this anywhere near this price point. So I think the GFX 50R would be a clear winner for landscape photographers, especially because it has the most resolution packed in a very small package compared to other competitive systems in that range. At $4,000, the GFX 50R is expensive. Now, if we're talking relatively speaking to other camera systems, it's not really even more than $1,000 more expensive than the sort of big full-frame cameras like the D850 5D Mark IV or the A7R III, and it is miles and miles away from the very, very expensive medium format systems that typically were the only options for medium format. The GFX 50S made waves because it was such an inexpensive entry to medium format. The GFX 50R just took that a step further. So while it is a good bit slower than a D850, that's just kind of what I'll use as a reference because that's kind of the comparative camera that I have the most experience with. The GFX 50R is definitely a little bit better when it comes to the image quality. The difference isn't substantial, but if image quality is what you're after, I mean, this really is the camera. And the autofocus on the GFX 50R is amazing when you're talking medium format. I think the GFX 50R and the GFX 50S are substantially better than any other medium format system, but the D850, 5D, A7R III, I think would be much, much faster if tracking focus is something you're going to use. So portrait photographers, landscape photographers, you're going to love it. Wedding photographers, sport photographers, wildlife photographers, it's probably not the camera for you. And the lens system plays into that as well. The longest lens that you can get is a 250mm prime, which is going to be closer to like a 180, 200mm in terms of comparative field of view on full frame. The widest lens you can get is actually really wide at 23mm, which shakes out to, I believe, like an 18mm similar field of view that you would have in full frame. But you have 7 lenses. You have a 23, 32 to 64mm zoom, a 45mm prime, a 63mm prime, 110mm prime, 120mm macro, and that 250mm telephoto, and that's it currently. There may be more lenses released later, but this system is never going to be the versatile thing like Nikon's system or even Fuji's own X system that has quite a few more lenses available than this. So if those 7 lenses or any of the other planned lenses that Fuji has announced are lenses that would work for you, again, portrait, landscape, maybe wedding photography if you're using it as a second camera, the system is awesome and is going to give you the best image quality possible, just with those couple of caveats. So who is it for really? Portraits, landscapes, travel photographers would absolutely love it for sure. Anybody looking to get the best image quality possible in a small package.